America didn't just recognize Jimmy Stewart, it trusted him. His soft voice, hesitant smile, and everyman presence made him feel like someone you already knew, someone safe in an uncertain world. By the late 1930s, Stewart had become the embodiment of decency on screen, playing honest men who struggled, doubted, and ultimately chose what was right. In a time when audiences craved reassurance, he delivered it effortlessly. He won an Academy Award, dominated the box office, and stood at the peak of Hollywood success. Yet as Europe burned and war crept closer, Stewart watched newsreels not with excitement, but with unease, sensing that while he was being applauded, countless young men across the ocean were already dying. And that imbalance began to weigh heavily on him. While Hollywood offered comfort, protection, and patriotic film roles, Stewart felt a growing moral tension between fame and responsibility. He was already a licensed pilot and understood aviation not as romance, but as danger, discipline, and consequence. Radio reports of RAF losses and bombers torn apart over Europe haunted him because he knew exactly what those missions meant. Unlike many who waited for the war to arrive at their doorstep, Stewart made his choice early. In 1941, before Pearl Harbor and before America officially entered the war, he quietly walked into an Army Air Corps recruitment office, not as a celebrity, but as a man determined to step away from the screen and toward a conflict he could no longer ignore. The rejection was humiliating. Despite his willingness to serve, the Army declared Jimmy Stewart medically unfit, too thin, underweight, physically inadequate for combat flying. For many, this would have been a convenient excuse to return to safety. But for Stewart, it felt like a moral failure. The idea that others would fight and die while he remained protected was unbearable. He responded with discipline, transforming his body through relentless training, diet, and routine, driven not by pride but by conscience. When he returned for reevaluation and finally passed, that moment marked the end of Jimmy Stewart, the movie star, and the beginning of Jimmy Stewart, the airman. The military immediately recognized his propaganda value, offering him roles in recruitment films, morale tours, and publicity campaigns that would keep him far from danger. Stewart refused them all. He had not enlisted to be photographed or applauded. He wanted combat duty. He specifically requested heavy bombers, the most dangerous assignment in the air war, where survival was uncertain and loss was expected. The aircraft he chose, the B-24 Liberator, was notorious, long-range, overloaded, and unforgiving. If it was hit, it burned. If it failed, it fell. Stewart insisted on flying it, knowing exactly what that decision meant. Bomber training stripped away any remaining illusion of glamour. Stewart endured grueling navigation drills, emergency procedures, simulated engine failures, and endless hours in cramped, deafening cockpits. The B-24 demanded precision. Even small mistakes could kill entire crews. Stewart studied obsessively, often staying awake at night rereading manuals, because leadership in the air required mastery, not charisma. Slowly, methodically, the actor disappeared. In his place emerged a disciplined pilot who understood that in combat, there were no retakes, only consequences. In 1943, Stewart arrived in England, where rain-soaked airfields buzzed with engines and anxiety. Young crews joked to hide fear, knowing that many of them would not survive their tour. Mission briefings were cold and clinical, with targets circled in red and enemy defenses marked in black. Casualty rates were never emphasized because everyone already knew them. 1 in 3 bomber crews would not come back. In this world, fame meant nothing. Only rank, skill, and luck mattered. Stewart understood that once the wheels left the runway, everyone was equal before the sky. Stewart's first combat missions erased any remaining distance between theory and reality. At 25,000 feet, the cold was brutal, oxygen masks froze, and metal screamed under stress. Then came the flak. Black explosions ripping holes through the sky, followed by German fighters tearing into bomber formations. Intercoms filled with panic, engines failed mid-mission, and aircraft vanished in fire without warning. Stewart kept flying, focused and controlled, even as every mission ended with fewer planes returning. Each landing grew quieter, each empty bunk heavier, as the cost of survival became impossible to ignore. Completing 20 combat missions placed Stewart beyond grim statistics. Yet survival came at a price. He watched friends die mid-sentence, saw bombers disintegrate in seconds, and learned how quickly hope could vanish in the clouds. Sometimes he landed and didn't speak for hours, carrying the weight of what he had witnessed. War was no longer noise or chaos. It became a constant pressure, a silent accumulation of loss that settled deep within him. Each mission took something he could never fully get back. Promotion followed survival, and Stewart rose to major and then colonel, placing him in command positions where his decisions shaped the fate of entire crews. Now he planned missions, selected routes, and calculated risks, fully aware that lines drawn on maps translated into lives lost or spared. Yet he continued to fly combat missions himself, believing that leadership without shared danger was meaningless. Crews trusted him because he faced the same flak, the same fighters, and the same fear they did. That trust held formations together when everything else threatened to fall apart. When the war finally ended in 1945, celebration erupted across Europe and America. But for Stewart, the victory was complicated. Relief came mixed with guilt, because survival always raised the same question. Why me? He carried the memory of those who never returned, knowing that peace did not erase the cost of what had been endured. The skies were quiet again, but the war did not end inside him. Returning to Hollywood was not a return to innocence. Stewart's performances changed. His characters grew darker, more fragile, more haunted. When he portrayed broken men struggling with despair, audiences felt the truth in it because it was real. In It's a Wonderful Life, his emotional collapse was not acting but memory, drawn from a man who had faced death repeatedly and learned how thin the line was between hope and despair. Jimmy Stewart remained in the Air Force Reserve long after the camera stopped rolling, eventually retiring as a brigadier general, a rank he earned, not one given for fame. He never glorified his service or dramatized his experience because he understood that real war needed no embellishment. Hollywood had made him a star, but war made him a soldier. And somewhere over Europe, in frozen skies filled with fire, a gentle man learned what courage truly costs.